The radical left's agendas are attacking your values. But conservatives like you haven't forgotten what this country was built upon. My friends, the Heritage Foundation exists to make sure your voice is heard, to represent your values in the D.C. swamp. The Heritage Foundation stands for your values and won't give up the struggle because they know you never will. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. You know, America, we spend an awful lot of time in this country responding to an unreality created by the people who hate America, created by people who get sucked into the narratives that are pushed out there each and every day, including this issue of flag burning in the First Amendment, and I will return to that. You're in the right place at the right time. I also want to talk about our ambassador to France, Charles Kushner, who did something fabulous. And the quisling, Macron, who would be more comfortable in Vichy France, got upset about it. We want to cover that too. And, of course, we have Ablego Garcia, where we've probably spent millions of dollars trying to remove this MS-13 wife-beating, human trafficking reprobate who's been here illegally since 2012 because the lower courts are filled with rogue left-wing Democrat lawyers dressed up as judges. It took nothing for him to come to the United States, and you see what it takes to actually remove somebody like this. It's a problem. But before we do that, my wife Julie and I did something we rarely do. We went to the Kennedy Center. Now that it's in the good hands of President Trump and Rick Grenell, among others, and we saw a play there that was absolutely fantastic. And I wanted to bring your attention to it. It's called Parade. Parade. And it only runs till, I think, the first week in September. And, you know, I'm not big on plays and that sort of thing. But this was really fantastic. Fantastic. And if you live in or around the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, I want to encourage you to go see this play. I don't get anything out of this. I'm just telling you how great it was. A fantastic play. I'm not going to tell you about it. You can Google it yourselves. But the cast is great. The singing was beautiful. And by the way, the restaurant there at the Kennedy Center was fantastic. I'm telling you all this because all you're hearing are attacks on the Kennedy Center and how they're trying to control it and this, that, and the other. This play, Parade, I don't think this play would ever have seen the light of day under the previous management. I don't. So again, the play is called Parade. The crew is magnificent. The singing is magnificent. If you want to go dine there before you see the play, I strongly recommend it. It's some of the best food we've had. I'm telling you the truth. Just terrific. Well, I'll give you a little taste of this. It's about a man named Leo Frank from Brooklyn who marries a woman from a small town in Georgia. And he moves to Georgia. And he is sort of a manager for a small company there that makes, among other things, pencils. And a young girl who did a little bit of work there, she's murdered. Leo Frank is set up by the DA. Leo Frank is Jewish. His wife is Jewish. A very heroic and gutsy governor. I'm not going to get into the details. Who takes steps that destroy his political career. The DA gets elected eventually governor, but this is a really, really good play, and it's executed beautifully. I think you're going to like it. So again, the movie is called Parade. It's at the Kennedy Center. Again, the restaurant there is fantastic. You might want to check it out. A date night, a day matinee, and so forth. As I said, we haven't been to the Kennedy Center in years and years and years. It's just too much schlock there. This was an outstanding play, Parade. Okay. Donald Trump. Let's do cut one. We'll set this up in the Oval Office today. The president about burning the American flag. Cut one, go.
What the penalty is going to be, if you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail, no early exits, no nothing. You get 1 year in jail. If you burn a flag, you get, and what it does is incite to riot. I hope they use that language, by the way. Did they?
Yeah, incitement.
Incite to riot. And you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail. You don't get 10 years, you don't get 1 month. You get 1 year in jail, and it goes on your record. And you will see flag burning stopping immediately, just like when I signed the Statute and Monument Act. 10 years in jail if you hurt any of our beautiful monuments. Everybody left town. They were gone. Never had a problem after that.
Mm-hmm. By the way, the play runs through September 7th. Okay, so what happened? President signs the executive order, and immediately the media jump into action. Immediately, the NeverTrumpers jump into action. Immediately, those who claim to be civil libertarians and constitutionalists jump into action. They could not possibly have read the executive order when they were commenting. They could not possibly have read it. But it didn't matter. They wanted to be the first. And they wanted to attack. And they did. Let's go over to one of the worst of the worst, one of the media entrails, started by Dan Abrams. It's really a radical left-wing and very sophomoric site called Mediocreite, a.k.a. Mediaite. And so they go online and they have different folks who are attacking what the president did. They're shocked at what he's doing. Find it unbelievably, incredibly outrageous. And they're posting and they're posting and they're posting. And again, I'm reading the executive order, and it's clear to me they didn't read it. Even some so-called conservative radio hosts. Because that's what the enemy does. It's what the media enemy do. And they're caught like fools. And they'll move on to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And that's why I spent my opening statement Sunday night on Life, Liberty, and Levin on Fox, reading to you from Federal District Court Judge Royce Lambert's decision about what John Bolton did in his revelation of classified information in his book without getting complete approval by the government. He was damning of Bolton. Damning. Which is why even today, 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time today, nobody's quoting that opinion. Friend or foe. Friend or foe. Cable TV or radio. Nobody's quoting that opinion. I quoted it to you Friday, here, behind this microphone, and on my Sunday show. Because there was a finding by a federal judge that what Bolton did and the information he released did, in fact, endanger our national security. Then I read to you Friday right here, as well as on my Fox Sunday show, what the Biden administration did a year later, which was outrageous in one sentence, without explanation, dismissing it all. You all would be doing prison time for 20 years. That's not been quoted on TV anywhere. Or, to the best of my knowledge, on radio anywhere, but by me. Here we have a decision by a federal judge. Here we have a document executed, filed by the Biden administration with the federal court, and nobody has read either of them out loud, not even cited them. So I did. And even today they haven't. And most of these people haven't read the president's executive order that he signed today, while they're trashing the hell out of him. The president's executive order doesn't create a new law, doesn't create a new offense. Let me read from it, so you'll be the best informed. Notwithstanding the Supreme Court's rulings on First Amendment protections, the court has never held that American flag desecration conducted in a manner that is likely to incite imminent lawless action, or that is an action amounting to fighting words, or is constitutionally protected. Now, the case they're talking about is Texas versus Johnson. That was issued in 1989. That's just 36 years ago. And the vote was 5-4. 5-4. It split the court. Rehnquist wrote the dissenting opinion. Brennan, a radical left-wing justice, wrote the majority opinion, but Scalia joined him. And yet Sandra Day O'Connor joined Rehnquist, as did John Paul Stevens, a liberal. He said, my administration will act to restore respect and sanctity to the American flag and prosecute those who incite violence or otherwise violate our laws while desecrating this symbol of our country. If you violate existing laws by burning the flag, if you incite violence by burning the flag, just as if you incite violence by words, you will be punished under existing law. It goes on. The Attorney General shall prioritize the enforcement to the fullest extent possible of our nation's criminal and civil laws against acts of American flag desecration, existing laws that violate applicable content-neutral laws. So if it's content-neutral, nothing happens. Nothing. While causing harm unrelated to expression consistent with the First Amendment. This may include, but is not limited to, violent crimes, hate crimes. So if you burn a flag, let's say on the grounds of a church or a synagogue or the NAACP or something like that, that could be a hate crime. illegal discrimination against American citizens or other violations of American civil rights and crimes against property. You grab my flag and burn it. That's a crime against my property. As well as conspiracies and attempts to violate, aiding and abetting others to violate such laws in cases where the Department of Justice or another executive department or agency determines that an instance of American flag desecration may violate an applicable state or local law. An applicable state or local law, such as open burning restrictions, like environmental laws, disorderly conduct laws, like you jump into the middle of a bridge or a street and you light the flag on fire and you're waving it. Or destruction of property laws. Again, you take a flag off a public building and you burn it. The agency shall refer the matter to the appropriate state or local authority for potential action. And if you're here on a student visa, if you're here with a resident permit, something of that sort, and you're burning the American flag, well, you may face deportation. But the First Amendment, you're here on a privilege and as a guest. Only in recent months have somehow the media and judges conferred rights on non-citizens that they've never had before. So this is not new ground. What the president is saying, however, and what is new, is that we will prosecute where we can under existing law. He's not violating any Supreme Court ruling. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Folks, we're less than a year from the 250th birthday of our great nation. But sadly, far too many have forgotten what this country stands for. Why? Because they forgot or were never even taught how this country was founded, why it was founded, and who founded it. If we lose our heritage, we lose America. That's why the Heritage Foundation needs your help. They've created a resource not just to ensure that patriots like you don't forget about the American founding, but to equip Americans with the facts they've never learned in school. This resource, Why the American Founding Matters, explores the question of why it's so important to study the American founding and why the founding still matters today. Folks, don't wait. Get your free copy of this essay today at heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/LEVIN. Now, included in this resource is a comprehensive timeline of the American founding from 1774 to 1800. You need to read it, folks, and so does everyone you know. So go to heritage.org/LEVIN now. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation. I didn't hear you, Rich. How much time do I have? Sorry. All right, only a minute. When we come back, folks, more to the court, more to the law. Gorsuch and Kavanaugh warn lower court judges in Trump cases. That's right, this is today. Constipated News Network. Have you heard about this? Of course not. Is Mediocrite one of the worst of the entrails of the radical left media? Have they gone around checking the internet for comments on this? Of course not. Since we only have about 30 seconds left, I'm not going to get into this, but as soon as we get back, and then Justice Jackson. She's been busy trashing her colleagues. What a disaster. She's violated all the traditions and decorum of that court, and she's more than happy about it. I'll be right back. How many founding fathers can you name? I bet most Americans can't name more than 2 or 3. Folks, if we forget the founding, our country's heritage, we risk losing our America as we know it. The Heritage Foundation needs your help, ensuring that the American founding and those who made it possible aren't forgotten. Their new resource, Why the American Founding Matters, explores why the American founding still matters in the 21st century and why it's so important that we study it. Without the unique principles that form the basis of our founding documents, the challenges of self-government, and the dedication dedication of our founding fathers. America as we know it could never have existed. So go to heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/Levin. Get your copy of this important new essay from the Heritage Foundation, which includes a comprehensive timeline of the American founding from 1774 to 1800. There's too much at stake to not take action today, so please get your free copy at heritage.org/Levin today. That's heritage.org/Levin.
This is the home of America's founding. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
By the way, the Prime Minister of Israel says, terrible, terrible accident. It is war, after all, in an urban area. A location was hit that housed a number of journalists who were killed in that location. And he's publicly stated it was a terrible thing, that they're very sorry, they're investigating it. At least 5 so-called journalists, or what I call journo-terrorists, who work with Hamas, who work with the terrorists, over the course of the last few months have been killed. But the media do not discuss at length their connections to Hamas. So you see, if you're a so-called journalist and you work with Hamas or the terrorists, if you do that, I guess you get special immunity. But that's not how it works. Now, these same so-called media types, if I were to ask them without them researching, how many journalists, real journalists, have actually been assassinated by Putin, they couldn't give you the number. How many real journalists have actually been killed by Hamas? They couldn't give you the number. How many journalists have actually been killed who were in Hong Kong and so forth that were killed by Communist China? They can't give you the number. You get my point? And still we have Jew haters and anti-Semites screaming at the top of their lungs with IQs in the negatives, accusing Israel of genocide. Why? Because the UN did. Why? Because they changed the entire definition of famine. And despite the fact that these reports are reviewed and unraveled and demonstrated to be false, they're still waved around by not just Democrats, 2 or 3 Republicans. And they're used in the media, and not just in left-wing media, on some conservative media platforms. So I want to put a salute out there to Charles Kushner. And I will get back to the Supreme Court in a moment. To Charles Kushner, who's our ambassador to France. France has a huge problem with Islamists. Their open borders have had real consequences. The chief rabbi there said last year that Jews need to leave. And in 10 years, there may be no Jews left in France. The Islamists have overtaken many parts of Europe. I hope you're watching the posts that I put up. Finland, Britain, Austria, Australia, Canada. Might as well be Europe. But I want to salute Charles Kushner. He published a letter, and he sent this letter to Emmanuel Macron, who's a quisling, who would be more comfortable in Vichy France. Dear Mr. Macron, on the 81st anniversary of the Allied liberation of Paris, which ended the deportation of Jews from French soil, I write out of deep concern over the dramatic rise of anti-Semitism in France and the lack of sufficient action by your government to confront it. Anti-Semitism has long scarred French life, but it has exploded since Hamas's barbaric assault on October 7, 2023. Since then, Pro-Hamas extremists and radical activists have waged a campaign of intimidation and violence across Europe. In France, not a day passes without Jews assaulted in the street, synagogues or schools defaced, or Jewish-owned businesses vandalized. Your own Interior Ministry has reported anti-Semitic incidents even at preschools. Public statements haranguing Israel and gestures toward recognition of a Palestinian state embolden extremists, fuel violence, and endanger Jewish life in France. In today's world, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, plain and simple. President Trump and I have Jewish children and share Jewish grandchildren. I know how he feels about anti-Semitism, as do all Americans. He directed the Education Department to enforce civil rights protections for Jewish students on university campuses, making clear that harassment and discrimination won't be tolerated. He expanded resources for the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Homeland Security to safeguard synagogues and Jewish schools. He ordered strict vetting to bar entry for foreigners espousing anti-Semitic hatred and revoked visas for foreign agitators. He oversaw the deportation of Hamas sympathizers and he cut funding to organizations promoting anti-Semitic incitement. And by crippling Iran's nuclear weapons program, he struck directly at the world's leading state sponsor of anti-Semitism and terror and saved millions of lives. These measures prove that anti-Semitism can be fought effectively when leaders have the will to act. Today, many French Jews fear that history will repeat itself in Europe. Parents encourage their children to emigrate. Surveys show most French citizens believe another Holocaust could happen in Europe. That's French citizens, not just Jews. Nearly half of French youth report never having heard of the Holocaust at all. What are children being taught in French schools if such ignorance persists? Mr. President, I urge you to act decisively. Enforce hate crime laws without exception. Ensure the safety of Jewish schools, synagogues, and businesses. Prosecute offenders to the fullest extent and abandon steps that give legitimacy to Hamas and its allies. As U.S. Ambassador to France, I stand ready to work with you and with leaders across French society to forge a serious plan that addresses the roots of anti-Semitism and defeats it. Mr. Kushner is U.S. Ambassador to France. What a powerful, important, what will be historic letter. And guts. What a gutsy letter. And what's the response? From Reuters. France summoned the American ambassador, Charles Kushner, after he wrote a letter to French President Emmanuel Macron, alleging France had failed to do enough to stem anti-Semitic violence. A French Foreign Ministry spokesman said on Sunday. Kushner, who is Jewish and whose son is married to U.S. President Donald Trump's daughter, published the open letter in the Wall Street Journal amid deep divides between France, the U.S., and Israel. In the letter, I don't need to comment on what's in the letter. I just read the whole thing to you. Kushner's letter follows another sent to Macron by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu earlier this week, in which he accused Macron of contributing to anti-Semitism by calling for international recognition of a Palestinian state. Macron has emerged as one of the more forceful critics of Netanyahu's prosecution of the war in Gaza, particularly with regard to Palestinian civilian casualties, while Trump has steadfastly supported the Israeli leader. Macron has publicly criticized anti-Semitism as antithetical to French values. And I can go on. Look, the fact is Macron is a quisling. The fact that in Europe, these left-of-center parties and these left parties are now relying more and more, just as they are in the Democrat Party, on Islamists. I don't mean Muslims. I mean Islamists. Islamists who support Hamas, who support Iran, who support Hezbollah. Like the fake MAGA in our own country. Like a big chunk of the Democrat Party. Terrorists. Flat out terrorists. The same kind of terrorists who blew up our Twin Towers. Who took out a plane in the middle of Pennsylvania. Who hit our Pentagon. Those terrorists. Those terrorists. We have a weak underbelly within our own country. The enemy within. The enemy within. Cowards. Now, one of these bastards come on this show, by the way. Yes. Takes guts to speak out today, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I love you in this audience, because you do. You're not intimidated. You know right from wrong. You know good from evil. You know who these people are. The fakes, the frauds, the phonies. It's incredible. And they will tell you, they will mimic the United Nations, they will mimic France, they will mimic Hamas, and they will tell you that there's genocide in Gaza and it's being committed by the Jews. There is not genocide in Gaza. It is a war-torn area. There's no question that there are a certain percentage of people who suffer. There's no question about that. But there is not genocide. If there's genocide, why the hell are the Israelis sending 18-wheelers in there by the thousands? Why are we supporting the transport of food into Gaza and working with the Israelis shoulder to shoulder to do it? Where's France? Where's Britain? Where are they? They're nowhere. Nowhere. That's why President Trump backs Israel. Now, the Jew haters are out of the closet. We know who they are. And the Jew haters hate people who aren't Jewish, too. Faithful Christians. They hate you, too. And they hate this country while they pretend to be purists in support of it. No, they hate it. We're responsible for forever wars, they say. We're responsible for the evil that is turned on us in other countries. They hate us while they claim to be purer than you and me. They're not. They're in bed with the Islamists. They sound like the Islamists. They're in bed with the Marxists. They admire Mamdani. They admire Bernie Sanders. They admire Hamas. I challenge all broadcast networks, all of them, to run the photographs, the video of October 7th. The video, all 45 minutes of it. Put it on TV. Show the world. Show the world. But they won't, because they're too gruesome. I challenge all broadcast networks to go into Gaza with your video cameras and show us the mass famine starvation that's taking place. Show it! Show it! No more phony photos on the front page of the New York Times or the Daily Mirror. Show us. But they won't. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Folks, we're less than a year from the 250th birthday of our great nation. But sadly, far too many have forgotten what this country stands for. Why? Because they forgot or were never even taught how this country was founded, why it was founded, and who founded it. If we lose our heritage, we lose America. That's why the Heritage Foundation needs your help. They've created a resource not just to ensure that patriots like you don't forget about the American founding, but to equip Americans with the facts they've never learned in school. This resource, Why the American Founding Matters, explores the question of why it's so important to study the American founding and why the founding still matters today. Folks, don't wait. Get your free copy of this essay today at heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/Levin. Now, included in this resource is a comprehensive timeline of the American founding from 1774 to 1800. You need to read it, folks, and so does everyone you know. So go to heritage.org/Levin now. That's heritage.org/Levin. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation. Geez, I don't know if I'll get to the Supreme Court justices this hour. I'm not trying to tag you along here. Might be next hour. We'll see. I'm not going to have time to get into this, but you're going to want to hear it, I think, which is Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. Concerned about how much time do I have, Rich? Well, let me get started here. The Constipated News Network, CNN. They write, in Donald Trump's long-running feud with federal judges, you see, that's how low IQ reporters write about stuff. President has found some support in an unlikely place, the nation's highest court. Excuse me, cholera. A growing sense of frustration with some lower courts articulated in terms that at times sound similar to Trump's own rhetoric has crept into a series of opinions this summer from the Supreme Court's conservative justices as they juggle a flood of emergency cases dealing with Trump's second term. That's not how a real reporter covering the court should write things. That they sound like Trump and so forth and so on. Kavanaugh sounds like Kavanaugh. Gorsuch sounds like Gorsuch. They're giving their honest opinions. Quote, lower court judges may sometimes disagree with this court's decisions, but they are never free to defy them, Justice Neil Gorsuch admonished in an opinion last week tied to the court's decision to allow Trump to cancel nearly $800 million in research grants. The rebuke, which was joined by Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and others obviously, flipped the narrative that it is Trump who has pushed legal boundaries with his flurry of executive orders. You see what I mean? Who wrote this damn thing? John Fritze, or Fritz, Fritze. He's got the IQ of a lobster. This is now the third time in a matter of weeks this court has interceded in a case squarely controlled by one of its presidents, wrote Gorsuch, who was Trump's first nominee to the high court. Kavanaugh was his second. They're admonishing the lower courts. You have to follow our decisions. Now, if a party didn't follow a court's decision, all hell would break loose, right? I'll be right back. This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. You know, before I get back to the Supreme Court, a lot of people are upset, conservatives. The president's talking about taking a 10% stake in Intel. And the reason is to try and get the chip manufacturing again back up and running. A passive 10%, given how we've lost that industry pretty much in this country. in the competition with communist China. So he's focused on this very, very much. And they compare it to Bernie Sanders and so forth. Donald Trump is no Bernie Sanders. He's no Mamdani. It's not the same thing. I mean, Donald Trump is planning a massive sale of stock in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Notice I'm the only one bringing this up, Mr. Producer. These are government-owned mortgage giants. He's the first president since these entities were created. He's basically going to sell big chunks of them to the private sector, to you if you want to buy some. To you. Up to 15% of these two companies to raise potentially $30 billion or more. So I'm just making this point. And he's met with J.P. Morgan's Jamie Dimon, Goldman Sachs, David Solomon. He's met with Bank of America, Brian Moynihan. So this is Fannie and Freddie. That's what they call them. Like they're little kids, which they're not, of course. These are massive assets owned by the federal government. Owned by the federal government. And so he seeks to privatize up to 15% of them. Now, there's no way in hell that a single Democrat, let alone most Republicans, would propose that. So Donald Trump is not Bernie Sanders. Donald Trump is not a socialist. He's not a communist. He's not trying to take over the private sector. I think in this case, I certainly haven't discussed this with him. He's looking at Intel. Look, you don't even have to agree with it. It's okay by me. I think it's a close call. But the point is he's saying, okay, look, we've got to get this chip industry up and running again. That's his attitude. That's his focus, because he's looking at communist China. He's looking at AI. He's looking at decades where we've regressed. That's his motivation, not to take over companies. Not to take over companies. How do I know? Because I'm watching it, just like you. And so that's what he's doing. And so that's a good thing. And Fannie and Freddie are instrumental in making 30-year mortgages possible. Now you watch. When he pursues that, how he comes under attack. Look at this. He's going to take these government companies and he's going to sell them off to the private sector, to the billionaires and the millionaires. Nothing he does will be acceptable to these people, to the media. Nothing. Of course, taking a 10% stake in Intel is controversial. I get it. But when you really look at the big picture, and this is what I want you to do. What's the Tennessee Valley Authority? Does anybody know? Obviously, people who benefit from the Tennessee Valley Authority, they know what it's all about. But most people who don't know. The TVA. What is it? Tennessee Valley Authority stands for TVA stands for Tennessee Valley Authority. It's federally owned electric utility corporation. It was established in 1933. It provides electricity and, seeks to improve the living standards of residents up and down the Tennessee River Valley. And that involves several states. Now, it operates without any tax funding. So it's self-sufficient. It gets its revenue from selling energy to people in these communities. That is a government-owned corporation. That's what it is. The president isn't creating government-owned corporations. He's not taking over corporations. He's not taking over Intel. He's not Bernie Sanders. TVA is the largest public power company in the United States. It's called public because it's owned by the United States government. I'm not saying that we should get rid of it. Please, don't misunderstand. It's the largest government-owned electricity utility, period. Trump is not proposing government-created, government-owned industries and so forth and so on. He's not. So just calm down out there, Wall Street Journal editorial page. Put out your editorial next about Donald Trump, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, what he's proposing there, to sell 15% of these government-owned mortgage companies, and then watch how he takes hits for that. The federal government owns about 25 to 28% of the landmass of the United States. They own like 80, 85% in Nevada and Utah. You go through these states, Montana, Wyoming, it goes on and on. President wants to sell off big chunks of that. Does that sound like a socialist, Mr. Producer? He said, we don't even know what we have. We're not even taking care of it. We should sell off chunks of government-run land to bring down the price of housing. I'm waiting for the editorial on that one. So again, he's not Bernie Sanders. And people shouldn't pretend that he is. People shouldn't pretend that he is. Now, I want to get back to the Supreme Court. Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and they're not the only ones. They're not the only one. Other conservatives, as the CNN piece says, just as harsh this year, Samuel Alito in March accused a federal judge in another case involving a Trump policy as committing an act of judicial hubris and self-aggrandizement of its jurisdiction. Folks, we all knew this. We talked about it before a single justice opened their mouth or wrote a single word. Utterly out of control. But that's what the media want. Why? Because they're all Democrats. They're all leftists. That's why. That's why. The Supreme Court has been consistently siding with Trump on the emergency docket for months. The Supreme Court is upholding the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen, as the president has, including in high-profile cases dealing with immigration, spending, the leadership of independent agencies. And Trump has won even in cases where there are serious arguments that his administration defied a lower court, said Steve Vladeck, CNN Supreme Court analyst and professor at Georgetown University Law School. Well, maybe he shouldn't be, if he's just another radical Democrat lawyer. In a biting dissent in the research grant decision on Thursday, liberal Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson described the result as Calvin ball jurisprudence in reference to the popular Calvin and Hobbes comic. Notice she's not criticizing, notice the journalist, so-called, the writer, is not criticizing her. Calvin ball is only one rule. There are no fixed rules, Jackson wrote. We seem to have two. That one, and this administration always wins. Now, see, that's a cheap shot at their colleagues. Cheap shot. You cannot trust CNN ever for anything. They promote Hamas. They promote Democrats down the line. They promote these radical activist judges. CNN is a dead network, barely airing, with really effectively non-existent ratings. At least at MSLSD, they changed the name to MS Now. Now I say now, MS Now. Of course, they didn't change their hosts and their guests, so it's still a dead end. Still a dead end. But back to Jackson. Business and politics. Calvin Ball, Biden's DEI pick. That's right, she's a DEI pick. Accuses fellow SCOTUS justices of being in the bag for Trump, writes Chris Donaldson. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson invoked a popular comic strip in an angry dissent, accusing her colleagues of being in the bag for President Trump, just like CNN did. See, they all have the same mindset. The left-winger who was appointed by disgraced former President Biden to fulfill his pledge to put a black woman on the SCOTUS has repeatedly shown that she lacks the intellect and temperament for the job with her emotional antics. I agree with that. Not that another example was needed, but Jackson served it up anyway, describing the court's latest overruling of an activist lower court judge who blocked the ending of DEI-based grants to the National Institute of Health as Calvin Ball. And what appears to be a first for a sitting SCOTUS justice in a former ruling, the fictitious game from the Calvin and Hobbes comic strip has been put into play, an argument that would seem to be more appropriate for social media, a form where Jackson's emotional and uninformed tirades belong, not on the bench of the nation's highest court. Who wrote this? Pretty good. Chris Donaldson. This is Calvin Ball prudence with a twist. Calvin Ball has only one rule. There are no fixed rules. We seem to have two. That one, and this administration always wins, she wrote. Jackson was venting over her frustration with the court's quote-unquote lawmaking on the shadow docket, accusing the majority of having bent over backwards to accommodate Trump. Trump is the elected president of the United States, ladies and gentlemen. These lower court judges, honestly, they're nobodies, except they have enormous power. They were plucked from obscurity. That's it. And they were rushed through by the Democrats. They were rushed through when they controlled the Senate. Here's ACLU types, ethnic organizations where they have lawyers, these types of people. The ruling Thursday, the SCOTUS sided 5-4 with the administration, allowing it to proceed with cancellation of $783 million in NIH research grants tied to DEI initiatives, including LGBTQ and other hot-button issues. Chief Justice John Roberts sided with the KBG and court's other two Democrat left-wing women because he's schizophrenic. Some days he comes into the court, he wants to be Hollywood John, loved by the New York Slimes. The families are close with one of the main reprobates at the New York Times, Thomas Friedman. Jackson argued that life-saving biomedical research was at stake, a talking point frequently used by the political left to defend their cherished DEI programs. She wrote, so unfortunately, the newest entry in the court's quest to make way for the executive branch has real consequences for the law and the public. It's completely logical that Jackson would oppose any rolling back of DEI since she herself, he writes, is a beneficiary of the racially discriminatory policies. I've never understood, and I was the first to point this out, so I'll continue, why it's considered racist to point out if somebody is a DEI appointee or not. If you cherish DEI, if you promote DEI, if you celebrate people be appointing under DEI, then why can't you mention that somebody is appointed as a DEI appointee? What is the problem with that? You can't, on the one hand, exclude merit as the exclusive test, and then on the other hand, when somebody points it out, attack them. Biden ruled anyone but an African-American female from the Supreme Court spot that was opened up by the retirement of Bill Clinton appointee Stephen Breyer in 2022. Constitutional law expert, Fox News contributor Professor Jonathan Turley was critical of Jackson's frequent forays into political rhetoric in a recent column. He said the histrionic and hyperbolic rhetoric has increased in Jackson's opinions, which at times portray her colleagues as abandoning not just the Constitution, but democracy itself. Well, Turley is right. The author of this piece is right, and therefore, and of course, I am right too. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
How many times have you told someone, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Now, that's great advice for most things, but not so much for a cell phone. See, over time, the battery life fades, the processor can't keep up, and it's fallen in the toilet perhaps one too many times. Fortunately, thanks to Pure Talk, your cell phone is something you can replace without feeling guilty. When you switch to Pure Talk this month, they're going to give you a Samsung Galaxy A36 for free with a $35 qualifying plan. Wow, just $35 a month for talk, text, and data, and a free Samsung phone, the scratch-resistant Gorilla Glass, and a battery that lasts all day. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Look, supporting companies like Pure Talk is a really good thing. You win by cutting your cell phone bill in half. They win by hiring more Americans and helping more veterans. Make the switch in as little as 10 minutes. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/Levin to get your free phone today. Again, that's puretalk.com/Levin. Switch to my wireless company, America's wireless company, Pure Talk. Hello, New York. You with me, New York? You with me? You with me? Probably the people who should be listening aren't, but there are a lot of people who tune in by accident. Then they start listening. I get this wherever I go, Mr. Producer. I get this wherever I go. And then I listened for a week. I listened to 2 weeks. I said, I like this guy. I like what he has to say. Well, here we are over at the New York Post. Zohran Mamdani wants to end all misdemeanor charges. What do you think about that? Oh, this guy. You know, it's funny. In my book on power, I talk about, you know, tyranny can be imposed on people, but in democracies, typically, they vote for it. Because they want something for free, or they want to believe. They want to believe. And so the fact that crime is going to go through the roof, the fact that police are going to have their hands cuffed rather than the criminals' hands cuffed, the fact that productive people are going to try to get the hell out of there if they can, the fact that you're going to have for lease signs on commercial properties from one end of the city to the other, the fact that your population may not drop heavily because people who want the best welfare benefits and illegal aliens are all going to flock to New York City. The fact that you're going to have to go outside the city to actually purchase groceries. None of that is thought through. I want, Mamdani, what's wrong with socialism? He speaks so well. Oh, I like this guy. Oh. No. By the time it's done, a lot of people who will have voted for him, New York, will have left. Because a lot of them are upper middle class or higher, white, overly educated morons. I want to dig into this a little bit more deeply. I shall return. How many times have you told someone, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Now, that's great advice for most things, but not so much for a cell phone. See, over time, the battery life fades, the processor can't keep up, and it's fallen in the toilet perhaps one too many times. Fortunately, thanks to Pure Talk, your cell phone is something you can replace without feeling guilty. When you switch to Pure Talk this month, they're going to give you a Samsung Galaxy A36 for free with a $35 qualifying plan. Wow, just $35 a month for talk, text, and data, and a free Samsung phone, the scratch-resistant Gorilla Glass, and a battery that lasts all day. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Look, supporting companies like Pure Talk is a really good thing. You win by cutting your cell phone bill in half. They win by hiring more Americans and helping more veterans. Make the switch in as little as 10 minutes. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/Levin to get your free phone today. Again, that's puretalk.com/Levin. Switch to my wireless company, America's wireless company, Pure Talk.
Mark Levin, the real American rebel. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
I want to read something to you as a foundation to this Mamdani story in the New York Post. Read it to you out of my book on power. Authoritarian democracies become more authoritarian and less democratic. I made the argument that negative power exists in both open and closed societies, the former experiencing soft negative power. And it is the ascendancy today in most democracies, including in America. It takes different forms and moves at different paces. The order of things, nature, morality, values, beliefs, etc., precedes government, exceeds the earthly limits of government, and exists in perpetuity, in spirit if not reality, unlike any government. Indeed, all governments come and go over the course of human history. Listen carefully to what I said. I wrote, indeed, all governments come and go over the course of human history. One group of men telling another what to do, how to do it, when to do it, is by itself nothing more than men placing limits on other men. One group of men telling others what to do, how to do it, and when to do it is by itself nothing more than men placing limits on other men. Again, reading from my book on power. But in their essence, human beings are not beings of other men or governments. They're not creatures of the ruling class. There is a universe that is greater than and beyond mankind and government. There is an inherent and supreme law that is unamendable by man-made law. Only governments that are established and exist based on this universal order of things are therefore valid, legitimate, and right. Conversely, as America's founders repeatedly declared, legitimate government is not possible, let alone sustainable, if the citizenry is not virtuous. John Adams said, and I quote, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." George Washington agreed, quote, "It is substantially true that virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government." James Madison warned, quote, "To suppose any form of government will secure liberty or happiness without virtue in the people is a chimerical idea." This was the consensus view of the founders. Of course, soft negative power will always exist, even if no government exists. It will exist in the civil society and throughout private life, where laws, rules, or customs of some generated from some source within a group or larger community are established and must be established, formally or informally. It must be honored and enforced to prevent chaos and anarchy, create some kind of social order, protect the individual and individual liberty, and secure the individual's holdings. Again, Locke called this a social contract. So some degree of soft negative power will be exercised that proscribes, if not contributes, or conscribes, some level of individual liberty. It follows, therefore, that the same notion of soft negative power applies to the most beneficent and sound governments. But is this really or accurately characterized as soft negative power? And I also explain further in the book that people vote for tyranny. And then when tyranny takes hold, it's too late. And it looks like that's what's happening in New York. Democratic mayoral frontrunner Zohran Mamdani, writes the New York Post, and his comrades at the Democratic Socialists of America want to wipe out the enforcement of all misdemeanor offenses, the Post has learned. In its most recent platform, the group blasts policing and detention as, quote, instruments of class war. This is pure Marxism, designed to guarantee the domination of the working class, and demands an end of what it calls the criminalization of working class survival. So I ask you folks in New York, I ask you folks all over the country who are in the working class, who work for a living to make ends meet, do you think enforcing misdemeanor laws are intended to dominate you or to protect you and your family? They go on, for all the working class to achieve collective liberation, we must constrain, diminish, and abolish the carceral forces of the state, from prisons and police themselves to their manifestations in all forms throughout society. This is their platform. They're still at war with the cops and law and order. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is an attack on what I just read to you, on what John Locke and others have written, on the Enlightenment. I told you Marxism is a throwback, just like Islamism is a throwback. It's primitive. And what they're basically saying is the rule and law of the jungle will apply. The more chaos, the better. Does that help the so-called working class? On the campaign trail, Mamdani has repeatedly called for police to stop focusing on what he's referred to as non-serious crimes. He said police have a critical role to play, but right now we're relying on them to deal with the failures of our social safety net, which is preventing them from doing their actual jobs. He said that in a video that he posted on Twitter, that is X, Wednesday. Now, the radical Marxist group has also pushed to slash arrests, gut prosecutors' budgets, abolish cash bail, and all forms of pretrial detention, scrap electronic monitoring, and end imprisonment for parole violations. People better pay damn well attention to this. You're going to live in a hellhole, and I'm not kidding. New York, Minneapolis, you've got a gun to your head. It's called Marxism and Islamism. Mamdani, a Queens Assemblyman, a member of the New York chapter of this radical Marxist organization, is endorsed mayoral candidate, has questioned the purpose of prisons. He's repeatedly called to roll back punishment on so-called nonviolent offenses, both as an assemblyman in Albany and as a mayoral candidate. He's doubled down on his longstanding push to legalize prostitution this week. You know, ladies and gentlemen, legalizing prostitution, that is sex slavery, that is sex trading. This guy is a puke. He's disgusting. He's disgusting. On the campaign trail, Mamdani backtracked from his prior defund the police views in the wake of the Park Avenue massacre. Yeah, but now he says don't enforce misdemeanors. So he's going to defund the manner in which you enforce the law, because the cops are going to be told you cannot do X, Y, and Z. I don't buy for a second that he's moderated on any of these policing questions, because he has yet to really articulate in any deep way why he's moderated or how he's moderated, said Rachel Mangois, a legal policy expert at the Manhattan Institute. All he's really said is that he no longer wants to defund the police, even though police and prison and jail abolition are core tenets of his party's platform. This guy's a liar. All Marxists and Islamists are liars. And Mamdani has even tried to challenge the definition of violent offenses. Quote, what violent crime is defined by the state. Violence is an artificial construction, he said. You paying attention, folks? The misdemeanors his party wants to erase aren't minor slip-ups. In New York, they include theft or shoplifting up to $1,000, drug possession, assault without a weapon, and even driving while intoxicated. They also include third-degree ID theft, second-degree sexual abuse, second-degree sexual misconduct, forcible touching, DWI, third-degree drug possession, menacing, petite larceny, third-degree assault. Says he's not going to enforce any of that. Plus, he wants prostitution. Can you imagine? Tourists are not going to come. They're not going to come. They're driving the city into a hole that they're never going to recover, said Susan Ginsburg, a resident of Greenwich Village, which has descended into a lawless drug den since soft-on-crime policies created what neighbors have decried as revolving door of justice. People will break the law with impunity. There has to be deterrent for breaking the law. It's astonishing that we're even having this conversation, said Maria Donzello, an Upper West Side resident who ran in the Democratic primary for state senate in 2022 and founded the group One City Rising. Everybody's so sick and tired of this, and we just want to have a normal, functional, reasonable way of getting through our day without worrying about being hurt. This is exactly the opposite of what New York needs right now, she said. To end misdemeanor arrests, Albany would have to pass a bill decriminalizing or downgrading those changes. No, they wouldn't. He would just direct the police not to enforce the law. That's all. He could force the NYPD, they write, to deprioritize certain arrests or pressure DAs not to prosecute certain cases, much like Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA. in his controversial Day One memo telling staff to go soft on armed robberies and drug dealing. I'm telling you, his election means death for the city of New York. It just means death. That will create an easy pass for criminals, enabling them to commit misdemeanor crimes, said Curtis Sliwa, Republican mayoral candidate. This will make the police even less effective at enforcement. Ultimately, this will cause the quality of life to decline dramatically, leading to a breakdown of law and order and chaos and disorder. It's crazy. It'll kill the city. It'll kill the city. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
How many times have you told someone, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Now, that's great advice for most things, but not so much for a cell phone. See, over time, the battery life fades, the processor can't keep up, and it's fallen in the toilet perhaps one too many times. Fortunately, thanks to Pure Talk, your cell phone is something you can replace without feeling guilty. When you switch to Pure Talk this month, they're going to give you a Samsung Galaxy A36 for free with a $35 qualifying plan. Wow, just $35 a month for talk, text, and data, and a free Samsung phone, the scratch-resistant Gorilla Glass, and a battery that lasts all day. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Look, supporting companies like Pure Talk is a really good thing. You win by cutting your cell phone bill in half. They win by hiring more Americans and helping more veterans. Make the switch in as little as 10 minutes. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/LEVIN to get your free phone today. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN. Switch to my wireless company, America's wireless company, Pure Talk. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, you know this show is heard everywhere on every platform imaginable, and those that aren't imaginable. Now, the Mark Levin Show is available on Spotify. Did you know that, Mr. Producer? As is my book on power. Not sure how many of you actually tune in there to the Mark Levin Show via Spotify, but if you do, those of you who subscribe to that platform, you can download On Power. It's actually a pretty sweet deal. Pretty sweet deal. If you have a premium Spotify account, they automatically get 15 hours of free listening per month, which is more than enough time to listen to the book. Subscribers, premium or not, only have to listen to about 20% of the book for it to count as a full sale. So, take a listen. You might like it. That's on Spotify. If you use that platform, you can download On Power, Mr. Producer. You can download On Power. Of course, Amazon.com, Walmart. The airports have the book. We want to thank all of them. Sam's Club, BJ's. The Costco's that carry books, we were just told they took on a significant additional number of books, so you should be able to find copies in more Costco locations right now. So it's not like it's not available. It's everywhere. If you haven't acquired it, I understand. You don't want to acquire it. But if it's something you've been thinking about for yourself or a family or friend or somebody who you think needs a little sense, knocked into them a little bit, they can read the book. It's actually a very good read. Now's the time to acquire it. I saw it at Costco. I think it was $16. And Amazon.com, it's under $20 as well. The same with all the big stores, Barnes & Noble and so forth. It's out front. It's easy to grab. And I know you're going to like it if you take the time to look at it. And many of you will, for which I am very grateful. Do I owe you something, Mr. Producer? On Power. You've heard me talk about it. I've read passages from it. It has everything to do with modern times as well as ancient times. I know you're going to have fun reading it and learn a ton. Walk through the door. Grab it. Grab it while you can. Oh, it's discounted heavily because it's still on the New York Times bestseller list after a month. We'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I may mess this up, so I want to do it properly. The Mark Levin Show is available on Spotify. So if you like to listen to the program on Spotify, I want to encourage you, those of you who subscribe to that platform, you can download On Power. And it's a very sweet deal they have there. If you have a premium Spotify account, you automatically get 15 hours of free listening per month. And so, if you're a subscriber, premium or not, you can listen to the program too, to the book as well. So, you want to try out the book? There it is on Spotify. You just download On Power. For those of you techie types, everybody else, it's everywhere. I personally like having the book, a physical book in my hands. I've got, I went out and bought more bookshelves, Mr. Producer, because I just have an enormous number of books. Enormous number of books. There's some guy out there. What is his name? I forget his name. I better not try. I'll do it another time. I want to expose this person to you as the Nimrod that he is, but I certainly don't want to use the wrong name. John Garamendi, or Garamendi, I guess he pronounces it, was the former lieutenant governor of California, and he's been a congressman for many years. And he's a fraud, a phony, and a fool, as many of them are. And he wants you to think that Donald Trump is creating a police state. May I ask how Donald Trump is creating a police state? He's trying to keep the streets of Washington, D.C. safe, but where's the police state? They keep telling us this. They told us this through his first term. They tell us it through his second term. They told us it when he was running for president. Before that, when he was a private, he's a dictator. He wants to create a police state. Then we have the court over and over and over again ruling in support of his view of the law and the Constitution. And then they blow off the court as, they're doing Trump's work. What is with these people? They are sick. They are sick. Then we got Al Sharpton on MS Now on the Morning Joe show. He keeps threatening to send in the National Guard to cities with black mayors. So this is all Sharpton sees, his race. That's it. That's it. Now, the fact is that we know from the stats, in the cities, most crime is committed by young blacks against young blacks. In other words, teenagers and above, not way above, in the 20s, many of whom are gang members. These are the facts. So if you're going to crack down on crime, you're going to have to crack down on at least some in that community. Yes, I think so. Now, when you do that, aren't you protecting people who live in those communities? Am I missing something? Yes, you're protecting people who live in those communities. That's the goal. When you're assaulted, when you're burglarized, if somebody is raped or somebody's murdered, the family's not thinking, oh, well, it's what the race of the person is. They've been hurt. They've been harmed. They've been killed. That's how sick this whole thing has gotten with these race baiters. People need protection. You don't need protection where there isn't crime. You need protection where there is crime. So here's Sharpton. Cut 5, go.
I preached in Washington, D.C. yesterday at Howard University. People feel they're under siege.
No, they don't. I was in Washington, D.C. myself. My wife and I went to the Kennedy Center, and I'll tell you what we saw. People were out on the streets, smiling, laughing. All kinds of people, all colors, all sizes, all genitalia, all 54 flavors. What I saw was peace and tranquility. He's at Howard University. He sees people think they're under siege. Well, maybe he should come out of Howard University and walk down around where the convention center is, because you couldn't do that before Trump took steps. I guarantee you Sharpton walks around with security. I guarantee it. The proof's in the pudding. In 12 days, not a single murder. There's not another big city in America that can say that. Not one. Go ahead.
Being picked on when you look at the cities the president has named. All of those cities have declining crime rates, and all of them have black mayors. There's a racial element that he's race.
You are a disgusting race baiter. You really are disgusting. I'm looking at the top 10 cities in America. I think they all have black mayors. He says crime is reducing. It's a strange phrase, isn't it, America? Reducing from what? If people don't feel safe on the streets, it doesn't matter. And people don't. Cops are being handcuffed all over this country. The consequences are obvious. They're obvious. Go ahead.
Here, he will not.
And all of them have lower crime rates per capita than the red state cities.
And what red state cities? That's an odd phrase, isn't it, Mr. Producer? Then the red state cities. Which ones are they talking about? Which ones are they talking about? I'm not interested in red state cities. We're interested in reducing crime. The president starts with Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. He wants it to be a flourishing city. He wants the people in the city to be safe. He should be applauded and celebrated by Sharpton, by the left. But of course not. There hasn't been a murder in Washington, D.C. in 12 days, and the Democrats are angry. And Al Sharpton's angry. Hasn't been a murder in 12 damn days. That's unbelievable. And it's unbelievable that I have to say it, but nonetheless. And that's racist? It's racist to protect the people in Washington, D.C.? How sick is this? Now, Al Sharpton, I guarantee you, doesn't live in a crime-ridden neighborhood. I know Joe Scarborough doesn't. He's down there in Jupiter. Can't they even say anything positive about this man and what he's doing and what he's done? Can't they admit when they've been wrong, undermining cops, Soros prosecutors, in the door, out the back with the activist judges? Can't they admit something is wrong? They can't. And they won't. The president's right. We have Representative Latifah Simon of California. And she's on MSNBC yesterday. What does she have to say about our great president? Cut 11, go.
You know, the California Democrats believe both in our state's constitution and we believe in the Constitution of the United States. We are taking this issue to the voters, unlike what was done in Texas. I want folks to understand.
Excuse me, Latifah. You violated your own Constitution. Stop lying. Stop lying to the public. You know you're not going to be corrected by MSLSD. You're supposed to have an independent commission or board. which was populated by Pelosi and Newsom, by left-wing kooks. And that's how you got a 43-9 Democrat to Republican Congress out of California, which meant 83% of the representatives were Democrats, even though 40% of the vote went to Trump. And now it's going to be 7% Republicans, 93% Democrats, even though the state is about 35-40% Republican. And I'm not even counting the independents or the non-affiliated. Texas, even if they do the 5 seats, and they're going to do it, be 72% Republican, 28% Democrat. Yet they go on and on and on like they're the ones who are the victims. Massachusetts, 35% Republicans, not a single Republican congressman. Not one. Illinois, 82% Democrat members of Congress. It's 54% Democrat. I can go on and on. And this clown at MS Now. Whoever the host is doesn't open their big fat mouth to challenge this woman. Go ahead.
Texas, the governor and the president of the United States and the Republican legislature, they essentially have brought us back to a 1950s America. The violation of the Voting Rights Act, they want
Where's the violation of the Voting Rights Act? Who says? Nobody says. She says. Violation of the Voting Rights Act. How so? Where? It's a challenge they can bring, and they are bringing. Violation of the Voting Rights Act. But the Voting Rights Act says only Democrats can get elected, I guess. Only Democrats. The Voting Rights Act. Go ahead.
People of color do not
shut up. People of color are all Democrats, I guess. They can't vote for Republicans. That's it. That's their idea of democracy. One-party rule. One-party rule. These are authoritarians. That's what I call them in the book. Authoritarians. And if the Republicans win the midterm elections, what are they going to say? They stole it. They stole the midterm elections. Whenever they win, it's legit. Whenever we win, it's stolen. Whenever we win, they sabotage us with their lawyers and their judges. Right? Crazy. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, we really have some great ambassadors. We really do. Huckabee in Israel, Kushner in France. Top. Really good. You know, Adam Schiff came to the defense of John Bolton. Isn't this weird? Why did he come to the defense of John Bolton? According to Judge Lambert, Bolton released classified information in defiance of the documents that he signed to protect them. He shortcut the review process for his book. He said he took a gamble, took a risk on whether or not he would be charged or prosecuted. So Adam Schiff comes to the defense of John Bolton on Meet the Depressed because Adam Schiff himself, it appears, reports say, he counted 2 homes as primary residences, one in California, one in Maryland, in order to get a favorable mortgage rate. Now, I don't care who you are. If true, that's a crime. So these people are reprobates. That's what they are. They're doing things they're not supposed to do. As you know, I was chief of staff to an attorney general. Classified information crossed my desk multiple times every single day. Some of it secret beyond secret. I never took a document home. I never made a copy. I never took notes. I never discussed it with anybody, let alone write a book. Let alone write a book. Now, I've got multiple properties. I've got one primary residence. One. Why? Because you're only allowed one. That's why. And the only reason you would put multiple primary residences is two reasons. To cheat a mortgage company and to cheat on your taxes. Right? That's it. So Adam Schiff is a character witness for John Bolton. Don't you find that kind of funny, America? So here she is, Welker on Meet the Depressed. She is awful. She stinks. Cut 13, go.
Do you believe that people need to let this investigation play out and not get ahead of it at this point?
I think this is clearly retribution. I mean, the idea that they just picked John Bolton, a prominent critic of the president, at random.
They didn't pick him at random. He was under investigation. In comes the Biden regime, randomly dismisses the whole investigation, including the grand jury. Now, we know it's not random. I'm just playing his game. They did it to reward him because his book came out months before the election. That's why he pushed it out, despite the fact that the government hadn't finished its review of classified information. He wanted to get this stuff out. His book was used. Same John Bolton who wouldn't testify for the Democrats in front of the impeachment activities. Schiff should know this. Schiff kept demanding to hear from him and was upset when he didn't. You understand, folks? I know you do. But that's Schiff. He should be in prison one day, along with Letitia, a.k.a. Latukas. Maybe the D.C. jail. They like the D.C. jail, I think. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America. We have a dear friend of ours, Yael Eckstein, with the International Fellowship of Christians and Druze. You're all aware of IFCJ. They're a fantastic organization, a fantastic mission in the Holy Land. And you've seen her on TV and so forth and so on. Welcome to the program, my friend. How are you?
Thank you so much. What an honor to be back with you.
Well, you folks are... I don't know, you move into the areas where you're needed. In other words, you're not very bureaucratic. If something's going on in the Middle East or even in Ukraine, you folks move very, very quickly to address it. And, of course, we saw what was taking place in Syria, the slaughter of Christians and Druze and others. And I wanted to talk to you because your organization was quickly activated and moved into action again. I would like you to describe what was taking place and is taking place and what you folks are doing.
Well, when we see that there are people we're able to help who are being persecuted, who are being targeted, who are being killed, whether it's that they need food or they need some sort of security and protection, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is there for them. So here in Israel, we've placed over 4,000 bomb shelters for the children of Israel, and we've delivered over 3 million meals through our soup kitchens in Israel to Holocaust survivors and hungry children. And when we saw what was happening right over Israel's border in Syria to the Druze and the Christian community, we knew that we had to act, because after October 7th, it was the Christian community who stood up so strong and bold and brave to continue to pray for Israel, stand with Israel. And we need to stand together in this, Christians and Jews. And so the fellowship went into Syria together with a partnership with the Israeli army, and we provided thousands of food packages and set up 2 medical clinics to help the persecuted Christian community there.
And persecuted, these people were being slaughtered, innocent people in hospitals, in their homes and so forth, right?
Yes, they were being targeted. So we see it's not spoken about enough, but we see Christians being killed and targeted across the Middle East, across Africa. We see that Christians and Jews are really in the same boat here against these, with these Islamic extremists that they themselves say first we're going for the Saturday people, and then we're going for the Sunday people. First we're going for the little Satan of Israel, and then once we get through to them, we're going to go for the big Satan of America. And so we see that Christians are being targeted and killed by these Islamists. Actually, in Syria, there were around 300,000 Christians in the 1950s, and today there's less than 150,000 Christians. And we see that same trend across the Middle East of Christians being persecuted, being killed, and needing to leave. And so the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is there to answer their pleas when they're calling out for help and no one else hears them and no one else is answering. It's our honor, it's our privilege, and it's our responsibility to be there to say, Hineni, here we are. So actually, it was in January, the first time that we went into Syria to help the persecuted Christian community there. It was right after there were over 1,000 Christians who were slaughtered in a matter of 2 days. And they didn't have any clinics, any medical clinics for over 30 miles. And so the fellowship went in and set up a medical clinic, and we delivered thousands of food boxes because they didn't have any food. Everything was destroyed by the Islamists. And then just a few weeks ago, actually, in Soweto, when the Islamists went in and targeted, killed thousands of Christians and Druze, once again, the hospital there didn't have any medicine, didn't have any of the equipment that they needed to save lives. People were dying from infections because they didn't even have antibiotics. And so the fellowship arranged an emergency delivery with helicopters together with the Israeli army to be able to provide life-saving equipment and medicines to the hospital in Soweto in Syria, and once again delivered food to people who are hungry.
So this is part of the terrorist effort, which is this ethnic cleansing to blow out Christians and Jews and Druze and other minorities in that area. And, you know, my audience knows this is the birthplace of Judaism. It's the birthplace of Christianity. Islam came 600-700 years after Christianity and so forth. You look at Bethlehem. Bethlehem was 80% Christian. Now it's 80% Palestinian and so forth. Is this part of a planned Islamist agenda just to wipe out all the other ethnicities and religions?
Wow. Well, it definitely seems like this is the spiritual warfare of our day, that we see these Islamic extremists that are going around and killing anyone who doesn't agree to convert to Islam. We see them taking over very quickly, not only as far as killing the minorities in the Middle East and in Africa, but taking over the minds of the young. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, Mark, is that they are relying on people not knowing the history. They're saying that Jesus was a Palestinian, that he was a Muslim, that he was an Arab. Well, Muhammad he wasn't even born yet. There was no such thing as an Arab. There was no such thing as a Muslim then. Or if you want to say the Arabic Peninsula, everyone who lived here were Arabs. It had nothing to do with Islam. And so I think that what we see happening is, from what I've heard, there are people in America, the children are no longer learning about 9/11. And so it's no wonder they're being able to be brainwashed to think that Osama bin Laden might have been good. That it's the words of Isaiah that he said thousands of years ago, my friend, but I see them coming to fruition today. He said, and then in a long time, when there's spiritual confusion in the world, which I think is now, good will be called bad, bad will be called good, light will be called darkness, darkness will be called light. And as we see Israel, the only beacon of freedom for Christians, for even Muslims, where we have more mosques in Israel than in most cities, even in America or in Europe, even places across the Middle East, that it's full freedom to worship however you'd like, whether you're Jewish, Muslim, or Christian. And somehow Israel is being called the bad guy as the Islamists are killing the minorities in every other country around Israel. So we have to wake up. We have to open our eyes. And the hope that I have, Mark, is that so many people like you that know, that are speaking up, that are refusing to be silent and saying, I believe that we can once again reclaim this freedom and this hope and this unity and this brotherhood. But first we have to stand up for these values of the sanctity of life that we believe in.
That's beautifully put. I'm talking to Yael Eckstein, who is the CEO, Director, President, Prime Minister of International Fellowship of Christians and Druze. And I say that in a complimentary way because this is a big organization that does an awful lot. You're a fantastic voice for the organization. You know, remind the audience, if you would, about your father. He founded this organization. Your father was a rabbi. Explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for bringing up my father, Rabbi Yael Eckstein of blessed memory. It was 42 years ago. He was a young rabbi in America, and what he saw was that everything that he knew about the history of Jews and Christians was something that was changing in front of his eyes, and he felt like he had to create a movement in order to be able to capture this brotherhood that we read about in Psalms. How good and how pleasant it is when brethren dwell together in peace. And he saw Christians who were praying for Israel and reaching out their hand in friendship to the Jewish community. And he founded the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews because he saw that we have to stick together in these values, these Judeo-Christian values that we hold dear. And so the fellowship today is the largest philanthropic organization in Israel. We feed the hungry, clothe the naked, shelter the poor. We build bomb shelters across Israel. We provide millions of meals every single year to elderly Holocaust survivors. And just as much as it's the aid, Mark, that life-saving aid that we're bringing home to millions of people, it's the message that I see being more important now than ever. When I say this is from a Christian who's praying for you, who loves you, and who continues to stand with you. Because here in Israel, it feels like we're so alone, that when we hear that we have friends, Christians who are praying for us and standing with us, it renews our spirit and brings forward that hope that I think we all need today.
The slaughter of the Christians and Druze and other minorities in Syria, has it slowed down? Because I know the Israeli government itself and military was intervening to try and protect them. You folks are in there trying to also protect them and feed them and medicate them and so forth. Has it slowed down a bit?
Well, right now we continue to wait and see what will happen. Of course, we know after Assad was overthrown, it's still yet to be seen what type of government will be established in Syria. On one hand, they say that they want to be tolerant of everyone and that they want to have relationships with the West and to be good allies to freedom. And on the other hand, it's the acting prime minister's people who went in, it was his militants who went in and slaughtered and targeted these Christians and Druze. And so the real question will be, does he have control over the militants? Will he be able to stop them from murdering the minorities in Syria? And I believe Yeshuat Hashem keheref ayin, as we say in Hebrew, redemption from the Lord can come in the blink of an eye, that I believe that through prayer, through action, there's a real possibility that we can see minorities being protected in Syria, freedom in Syria, and that would be good for the West. But as we're praying for that peace and brotherhood, we also have to make sure that we are protecting ourselves so that no atrocity could take place like those that have taken place in Syria in the past 6 months.
You have a fantastic reputation in Israel and in the United States for what your organization does. And I imagine it's almost... I don't know how the Red Cross and these other organizations operate. In fact, there's some criticism of all that. But you really have to shift quickly, don't you, when you see something going on and you have enough volunteers? So it's really a management issue that you have to get involved in: personnel, food, and so forth and so on, transportation. Yeah.
That's exactly it. What we've learned is we are the humanitarian first responders in Israel as the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. And so the time in between the missile attacks on the ground in Israel, the time between the wars, is when we have to prepare. Preparing means placing the bomb shelters, equipping hospitals with bulletproof units so that under rocket attack they can still operate. In fact, we all saw when there was a hospital in southern Israel that was hit by a direct rocket attack from Iran, destroying the entire surgical unit. Now, it was a miracle that surgical unit, the entire floor, was evacuated just the day before. And why was it evacuated the day before? Because the International Fellowship of Christians and Druze provided them with a sheltered surgical unit that they moved into. Otherwise, the whole unit would have been full and there would have been hundreds of deaths. And so it's during those times of quiet in between wars that we're investing in protecting people for when the rockets fall. But we're also coming up with plans and volunteers on the ground so that while the rockets are falling, we're going bomb shelter to bomb shelter delivering food. We're going home to home of elderly delivering them food. And in fact, during the Iran war, I was on the ground when an Iran missile hit an apartment building near Tel Aviv. And I got there right away, and actually there were still search and rescue teams looking for bodies that were buried under the rubble. And me and my volunteers on behalf of the International Fellowship of Christians and Druze were both providing flak jackets and helmets to these heroic first responders looking for the bodies in the rubble because the rockets were still falling, the missiles were still falling. But we also had thousands of meals, and we were going to the elderly who lived near that area, whose windows were completely broken, whose homes were nearly destroyed, and yet they couldn't evacuate yet. And we were making sure that they had food. I remember meeting one woman who was 92 years old, and she fell on the way to the bomb shelter, and she was in her bed, and she had all different wounds all over her legs. She couldn't move. And when I came in, she started crying with joy. And she said, I wouldn't have been able to have a meal without you. And I said, it's not me, it's Christians in America. And she started singing songs of faith. She said, God hasn't forsaken or forgotten me. So it's those type of stories that make everything not just worth it, but a blessing to be part of.
So if people want to help you, where do they go?
Wow, thank you so much. They can visit our website at www.iscj.org. And, a food box is $25. For a couple, it's $50. That every single dollar helps. There's no amount that's too little to make a difference. And you can also see how your gifts are making a difference on the ground, on social media, on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. I document what the fellowship is doing, what I'm doing on the ground, along with my family life in Israel. So you can follow me at Yael Eckstein.
Beautiful. All right, my friend. We look forward to having you back. Keep up the great work. We're very proud of everything you and your group are doing over there.
You are incredible. You are a beacon of light and hope and faith and truth to the world. So I continue to hold you in prayer.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. God bless you, my friend. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Let us go to Marshall. Victor, Montana, the Mark Levin app. We don't have a lot of time. Go.
Hey, Mark, just two quick things. First, how are you doing? Well, I guess
I'm good. Thank you.
I got your signed copy of On Power the day I went camping with my kids. And I sat there and I read it, around the campfire to my kids. My oldest, he's 10. I said, do you understand what I'm reading to you? No, but I'm trying. Which tells me I got to read a little bit more to them.
Yes.
But
how'd you like
so much for that. It kind of brings me to my second point with the executive order on flag burning. Mm-hmm. The people that we fight against, they use our rights against us as a weapon. They use negative language to coerce Christians, good, honest Christians and God-fearing people, law-abiding citizens, to vote a certain way. Because they pull on our heartstrings. They make us feel like we're doing something evil.
Marshall, I got to go. It's fantastic. You got it. You were reading it, and you got it. He's talking about the language chapter. Folks, it's very, very important that you read that chapter, all the chapters. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, emergency personnel, our truckers, the men and women in Ukraine, the men and women in Israel, and you, the American people. God bless you. Thank you for being here. See you tomorrow.